Good afternoon. My name's John with the Pine Tree. I have the great pleasure of being here with the clerk recorder candidate, Mike Miller.
Good to see you, John.
Good to see you. Now, what brings you to run for this? I know this has been a long slog. We didn't get the chance to do a little chatting on the primaries, but now we're here.
I got a fly running with me here.
Now we're 3 weeks out, so what?
Well, actually, I worked at the government center in the administrator's office for a few years, and that was really my first exposure to working for the government, and I kind of got the bug.
Right.
Prior to that, a long history in the private sector, in the aerospace industry, and before that, service in the military. Mm-hmm. And so with that kind of a diverse background, I think that I'm well suited to dealing with people. I mean, you start off as a serviceman and then leave the military, go through the industry from an engineering position to a vice president's position, actually 2 separate vice president's positions within Litton Industries over the years, and then working for the government, working in a very unique capacity where I got to become familiar with all the departments, all the department heads.
Because you were the administrative office, right? Correct? Yeah.
And that position has since it was eliminated and subsequently redefined and changed somewhat. So what I did is not really there anymore.
Right.
Tom Mitchell created this position, and I got to not only work with all of the government employees, the department heads, all of the supervisors, but the general public as well.
Right.
It was whether it was a parks project or if the water had been shut off at a park someplace, or like the monument for the Veterans District up in Murphy's.
So if there was
we needed a new water tender.
Mr. Fix-It, you had to go make things work within the system, so to speak, to get them done.
Yeah, when Brent Harrington was there, he referred to me as the go-to guy. And
that's probably a more elegant term than Mr. Fix-It.
And then prior to that, Mitchell referred to me as the complaint department because anything that would come in came to me. And believe me, there were a few, and I managed to resolve a lot of them.
I understand.
And some of those complaints and requirements came from the department heads.
Right.
And some of the more fun requirements were in working with the elections group under Karen Varney, because that's something you can't staff for. You'd have to have 200 full-time people.
Right.
Providing vehicles and providing personnel from
surging for election day, so to speak, for during
working with all the volunteers and working with I had a building and grounds organization, and we would always loan staff back and forth for that.
Right.
So I got pretty well acquainted with that operation, more so than I did with the auditor's operation or the assessor's operation. And when these elected positions that came up for this midterm, I looked at the assessor. I think that that requires an appraisal background. I looked at the tax collector, and that scared me. So, and also I looked at the auditor, and I thought, well, I'm not really a numbers guy, and that I think that you've got to have a real affinity for doing that. And so clerk recorders was kind of a natural for me to pursue. I did also work with Karen to provide a location for staging all of the new voting machines, and so there's a lot of new equipment in there.
Yeah.
And which is good, because I think at this point in time, we have to preserve the institutional knowledge, and that would be at the expense of buying new equipment. Fortunately, the equipment is there.
Yeah.
And if you have jobs here, you've got people spending their incomes here. If you're buying a new mainframe, or if you're buying new voting machines, for instance, that revenue is leaving the county. And so I think that having that behind us is good for that department.
Right.
And we can now look at ways of being creative.
And by most reports, some of the transition to the electronic, the voting system's been working well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it's far better.
Yeah.
The other voting machines I tried to sell when I was in the administrator's office, because I was responsible for all purchasing, the airport, public access television, and building and grounds, a number of different disciplines. And I couldn't get any takers on the old voting machines. They were that undesirable as
Right.
compared to the new ones.
Right.
So we've got those old ones, by the way, or that old style is still being used in a lot
Sure.
of locations.
Yeah.
And so we're fortunate here in this county.
Now, going forward, let's see, because whoever wins New Era is going to replace a long-standing, person that's been in that department for a lot of years. Now,
20 years.
20 years. Now, what do you see hitting the ground running, so to speak, is some of the key things? I mean, what will you try to, because, I mean, one of the things we were talking before we started is with the economic dips we're in and things like that, is that department will likely see maybe an increase in activity, but no real increase in budget, no realistic expectation of any increase in budgets or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where again, we're fortunate in that we don't have the capital outlays to make. Mm-hmm. The institutional knowledge, the resources that are there in the form of people. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely essential that we retain those, that institutional knowledge. Those are going to be the people who can step up to the plate. And the nuts and bolts work that has to be done, and as you pointed out accurately, is going to grow.
Right.
And we're going to have to do it we got to get more out of less. And ideally we can get more out of the same staff.
Right.
But if someone retires, we'd have a hard time replacing them because of budget issues.
Yeah. Now, I guess what a lot of people don't realize is a good portion of that department, you got to keep the supervisors happy, huh? Isn't that
well, the supervisors are 25% of the department budget,
Right.
So obviously there's only 5 of them, But the activities in the boardroom,
right,
which are critical,
right,
and the agendas, the preparation of the
packets,
agendas,
and all the rest of that stuff all run,
and the crossing of the T's, the dotting of the I's,
right,
the reviewing of the packets,
right,
the distribution of the packets, that is critical. And the service to the supervisors when they need something. I know in the past, I wrote a lot of resolutions on behalf of the supervisors. I think since I've been gone, that a lot of that has been transferred over to the clerk recorder's office.
Right.
I suspect, now I don't know for a fact, but I suspect that a number of their packets are now being prepared in that organization rather than in the admin.
Now, I heard one of the new things, though, is they're going to have it so that any poultry-related noise issues, or you're going to have to write those complaints.
Poultry?
I'm just, I'm just like the chicken man. I was complaining that you were going to have to do all the respondents to constituents on poultry-related noise issues. Right?
Back in Mitchell's day, he would have had me up there massaging chickens, and that's the complaint department.
That was a joke.
Of course, when Brent was there, he would have just said, "You're the go-to guy. Do something."
Go fix
and
it.
I would have found Colonel Sanders.
What I think is, let's see, the last little kind of wrapping up here is what are some of the things that you think that department could do? I think it's been a very well-run department. What goals would you like to see? Is there some of the things that they can start doing more electronically, more systems? What would you like to see done?
Well, ultimately, I'd like to see the whole thing automated. But
right.
As I said, from budgetary constraints are going to prevent that.
Right.
And for now, doing a lot more with what we've got, and being creative. I would, if elected, I would get into office and do a real thorough review of how each of the 3 different disciplines there, how everything is being conducted. I think that the budget that is being inherited for this coming year is the best it's going to be for a few years.
Right.
I think that Karen Barney has done a fabulous job in working with the board and the administrative office for this year's budget. I think that our tax dollars are going to probably continue to decline for a couple of years. I think we're in an extended trough, and the entire term will be one of, working, doing the most you can with the least that's available. Right. And by the end of the term, hopefully
it's coming back around.
We got to be optimistic somewhere along there.
Yeah.
And 4 to 5 years out, if the 15 or 20 million jobs that aren't here today haven't started coming back, then we got a lot more serious problems than the clerk recorder's office, I'll tell you.
Well, I guess looking at, a couple-minute little summation thing. You're running against an opponent who is in the department.
Yes, yes.
And you were looking at maybe bringing some, a little bit of a different perspective from that. I mean, if somebody's sitting there ready to mark that ballot and they're starting to here pretty soon, what would you say to them? But why? What's
it's the department head position, and every place in the industry that's a manager's job. It's referred to as a department manager elsewhere. And that's where my strengths are. I've managed people, programs, and departments for 30 years in the private sector, and I think I can bring some of the private sector whiz-bang to this.
Right.
Also, the people skills, conflict resolution, anger management, all these other things. Those are things that I lived through in the aerospace industry, and I learned a lot. And I can apply that to this position as well.
All right.
And my familiarity with the government, and certainly my discipline that comes from the military.
Right. Very nice. Thank you very much. We appreciate you spending
Thank
a few minutes with us.
I'm glad we got together.